In this video, we're just going to have a look at the changes to the ACF 6 interface. This was with the latest new release, and you'll see it has a whole new style, which looks good. You then have the tools here, same tools as before, just styled a lot nicer. And then updates was where you put in your license key to get updates. So that looks good. If I head back to the field groups, let's add a new field group. So we'll click on Add New. And after clicking on Add New, the nice thing is that right where your mouse was, pretty much you can add the new title. So there we have the new title of the field group, and then automatically the first field is opened, and in here you can then add whatever you want to add. So in the previous version, you would start off with the field label name and then the field group. In this one, you start with the field group and then the label and name. For me personally, just prefer the field and label first, because if I'm working on something, I want to start off. I have a list of fields that I have to create. So the first thing I want to do when it opens up is start off with the field name, and then select the field type. So just a slight change in the way you work. Okay, and just saying that you can't use the word field. So let's say the field's name, and that's a good tip. So you can't inadvertently use a field that you shouldn't. And let's make this a text area. So there we have our text area, and default value. Let's put in the number of lines that we want. Okay, so when you make your field, you can't actually do any edits to it. So you then have to go to the next tab, and now you have to set it as required. So I think what I would have done is move the validation of required and character limit to the side here, so that you could choose your field type and then choose whether it's going to be required or not. Then we move over to the presentation tab, and this is where you do the settings. So the presentation probably refers to what the person sees on the front end, or when editing inside, say, the post, where you would have this. Here you can set the number of rows, placeholder text, new lines, wrapper attributes, and then the last one here, the conditional logic. So with that done, we can click there to close, or we can click here to close the field. Then let's have a look at another field then. So we'll add a field, and this time let's look at, well, if I can get it to open, let's have a look at a repeater, because that's something different. And so now we have a repeater field, and then we have the validation. Once again, I think that would have worked nicer here on the right. And then we have the presentation, and that I would have preferred, I think, here to have the field label, and then on the right here to then have the collapsed and the button label. I think that might have worked nicer, because now the button label before used to be at the bottom, and now you actually have to go to a completely different section to see. So if you're not sure what was in your repeater, it just means a few more clicks. And you need to select collapsed or not, or what's the field that shows when it's collapsed for the person to see, a button label, add a new row, that's fine, and the instruction. So, and then the conditional logic. So perhaps in all this empty space here, there might have been a way to just put in a box and then put in the validation, and maybe even the conditional logic. Then if you scroll down, you get to your repeater field. So let's add a field. So field, once again, the first field is always going to be the field type. So not the way that I like to work. Always like to first name the field and then decide, is it going to be a text? Is it going to be a text area or YC week, for example? Not a fan of the way that it is at the moment. And then once again, you've got to remember not to use fields. And then if we go to presentation, back to general presentation, if you want to see what happened on a previous field, I'm going to click on field name, but now it opens on conditional logic. And which field was it? Am I looking for something under presentation? Or am I looking for something under general? So you'll just have to learn what goes on each tab. So one of the big changes then with the tabbing system is you need to know now for each field group what information is visible under each section. So here we have for example, if it was a button group, you have to remember that these are the values that are available under a button group, and then under presentation, these are the instructions. And then similarly, if you looked at, say, a checkbox, you'd need to remember where the choices go and then what's under presentation. So there's a little bit of a learning curve here, because before, where you had the long list of items under each other, you could just scroll up and down until you found them. Now you're going to have to get used to and learn what's under each tab. Then and also you're going to need to remember that when you leave a tab, whatever the last tab is that you were looking at, that's the one that'll be visible. So if you then go back later to see or want to find something, it's not immediately available as it was when everything was on one page. You're actually going to have to really look to find what it is that you're looking for. Then on the repeater field, you'll see that you'll have this line down the side and this purple highlight. And that would just be to indicate what field you're looking at. And so if that was the field, let's add a field. And then once again here, just remember that whatever tab you were looking at last, that's the tab that's going to come up when you open the field. So whereas in the previous, of course, you just had the list, so you could see everything all the time. Now when you open up, you might have to flip, say, from general back to presentation, and then from here you might go back here to validation. So there's a lot of flipping and clicking to be done. I'm not sure if that makes it easier for people who've never used advanced custom fields before or not, but I just know that when you're working with a lot of fields and you're looking at different settings and options for the different fields, it is going to make things a little bit slower. And then also to remember everything that's on each of the tabs will just take a little while, and then you'll get used to where to find the information that you need. So I'm not sure that I'm a big fan of the tabs at this stage, and coming across from the previous version where you could see everything together, this for me is a little bit counterintuitive in that I now have to click, 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 and then open the next field and then realize, oh, what tab, but now I go back and yeah, so there is a lot of tabbing to and froing, and that's just something that you're going to have to get used to. I don't think that this interface is going to be changed or adjusted in any major way. Also, the jumping of the links, so when you move your mouse over, you hit duplicate instead of field name. You're just going to have to get used to the fact that we have a lot of jumping. It's the only site that I work on that has jumping navigation, so I'm pretty sure there's a good reason for it somewhere. Yeah, and then at the bottom here, you have the allocation to the different settings. So where is this going to appear on the page of a post or a custom field, wherever it is. And so once again here, location, presentation, and group settings. So Location rules as normal, that's fine, as they've always been. Presentation here, you can see you've got where to appear on the page, top aligned, left aligned, high, high off the title. So that's pretty standard. And then where to hide it. That's great. And then you have group settings here, and the group settings. So sorry, down here, as before. So I'm not sure if it was really necessary to split things up so much, especially when you hit location rules and then find yourself looking at the field name instead of at the location rules. Why the location rules and group settings couldn't have been grouped together, and then presentation on another tab. That way you wouldn't have this tab jumping as much, would have been a lot less. Unless there's a way to not to have that happen. Yeah, so it's definitely a cleaner look and feel. A lot more tabs, which I think are counterintuitive. I preferred the longer list where you could quickly scroll to get to the information. And then also the fact that the tabs seem to stick on the last tab you looked at. So invariably, if I wanted to get something off this tab, I'm going to have to bounce around between the tabs. So not, for me, not the greatest. And then also a lot of wasted space. So here, for example, for presentation on the right-hand side, there's, all that space is wasted. I'm not sure if for any other field type that would be used up. So definitely not on the repeater, a date and time picker. I can't see that. No. So in this wasted space here, wouldn't it have been possible to do something? Wouldn't it, for example, have been easier maybe to move the instructions around? And of course, I'm pretty sure the presentation is different for each field. So if we did a post object, for example, filter by taxonomy, filter by post type, so that's all there. Then the presentation. So couldn't there have been less tabs? So couldn't, for example, the conditional logic and the presentation and the validation be put onto one tab, and then the general on another? That way you would only have the two tabs to flip between instead of four. If we go back to the repeater and we, okay, so that's a repeater field. So we're going to add a field in. No, can't add the field there. Where is the, oh, what's going on here? Okay, so it's on repeater, but there are no repeater fields. And when I added a field, it added a new field instead of a repeater field. So let me try that again then. A group field. Okay, so now it's working. So I don't know what happened there. The repeater field not working. So I'm on field type repeater, and there's nowhere to enter the repeater field values. Let me save the changes and try that again. So we'll save the values. I'm going to go back to the repeater. And where did this field come from with a key of 125? So now I'm a little bit confused by what's going on here. I'm getting fields added that I didn't want to, and suddenly I've got, okay, so I don't know where this field comes from. I didn't ask for it. It has no field label, no field name, and it has this key of 125. So that to me doesn't, it's not in line with the other fields that I have. So I'm not sure what's going on. And that happened when I tried to select the repeater field. So let's try that again. I'm going to just go back to the text field. And then I'm going to go back to repeater. If the drop down stays open. What? Okay, then I'll go to repeater. I've selected repeater, and once again, I have no repeater field. So I'm not sure why or how it says it's a repeater, and yet here there are no repeater fields. So let me check if they're under validation, presentation, nothing, conditional logic, nothing. So it doesn't look like the repeater field works then. Let me try flexible content. So flexible content works. There we have the flexible content, and I can add the fields. If I go to the repeater doesn't work. So as far as I can tell, then the repeater field isn't working as well as it should. And now I have another field arbitrarily added to my field group. So that's just one of the issues that I've picked up here with ACF 6 in just checking out how it works. Let's have a look at, another field, maybe the group field. Is that working as it should? Yes. And in that group, perhaps we have a repeater. So let me add a repeater and see if the repeater works, if it's, or if that behavior was just unique to that piece. So let's call this rep1 field name. That's fine. General, and I want to close this repeater tab. So now when you're in a repeater, you'll see here that the bar isn't highlighted. So you might think that this is the end of the repeater field, and it's not actually, or the beginning, it's actually the row above. So you've always got to remember that when you're working with the repeater, that the purple bar is actually just where the tabs are, and the end of the repeater field is actually in the row above. It's not immediately obvious, but something you can learn to live with. Once again, here on the presentation, lots of open space. Okay, so we're in the repeater, so that's fine. We'll just add a text field. Let's just say any text. Right, so, okay, so the repeater in the group field is working, but the repeater in the repeater field isn't, and also it's adding these arbitrary fields. And then here, there's no label, and that's for this. This was the group. Okay, so there we have that. I'm going to save the changes. Let's have a look at another field. Let's see, what else can we look at? Let's have a look at an accordion. So we have the accordion field label. Let's make it open and close field. No, hang on a second. Now we have to go to presentation, conditional logic, general, open. Okay, so that's all that you can do on the accordion field. Right, so now I'm going to close that field. Let's save the changes. Right, so that's been my first experience here with Advanced Custom Field 6. In the release candidate 3, I did mention I wasn't happy with the tabbing. I still don't think the tabbing is great. I'm not sure why these fields are created automatically when I try and create a repeater, but that was my experience. Maybe that's something that'll get sorted out. I don't know if that's a bug. Not sure what that is. So, in conclusion, then, I think it'll take a while to get used to the tab. There's a lot more clicks. You're going to have to learn what information is available on which tab, which I think will slow down. I think it would have been better to, for example, have and now, of course, you open a tab and it's not on now you've got to click to go back to general. That's another issue, I think. I think when a tab closes, maybe it should always go back to general. So every time you open a a field, then at least you know where you are. And it doesn't take you a while now to realize, oh, hang on, I need to go back here. Yeah, so I would have preferred to have all the field information with the field instead of splitting. The validation and conditional logic, I think, could have been grouped together, and in that way you would just have two tabs. So one for the field information, and then one for validation and the conditional logic. That way, general and presentation together, validation and conditional logic. I think that makes a lot more sense. And if you're new to custom fields, I do think that having doing it that way around would make it easier then to understand which fields are more related to each other than others, because the general and the presentation are definitely related to the field and what people see, and then the validation and the conditional logic, conditional logic, even the validation, I think, should be grouped with the field. So maybe the layout shouldn't have been so many tabs, but maybe made use of more of the space on the side, so that you could see what's going on with your field when you're working with it, instead of now going, okay, is it compulsory or not? No, hang on a second. Let me just check the validation. So I can't see the logic in the tabs the way that they've been set up, and I also believe that if the single page here had been maybe assembled in a slightly different way, then you could still get all the information on one page, and maybe in a slightly different way that made more sense. So perhaps you had the general, and then on the side here you had the validation. The conditional logic is something that you might determine along the way, so you might want to have that at the top here as well. So you'd have the field type, the validation, and the conditional logic, so all the kind of admin stuff, and then the presentation and the general you would have together, because that is all about the field. So that would have cut it down to still being on one page, but just arranged in a better way, or to then create just two tabs instead of having to learn what's on 4 different tabs, just had to learn what's on 2 tabs. Yeah, and then also here at the bottom with these tabs, you're going to find yourself bouncing around all the time because the middle tab is so high. That's not going to go away anytime soon. Well, Advanced Custom Fields is still a fantastic plugin where you can do a lot. I'm not sure what the plans are in the future. Here, for example, I have a field and it has no name. In the past, oh, that's because it's an accordion field. Okay. So yeah, I'm not a fan. Maybe over time it'll be refined and fine-tuned a bit better. I do like the new look. It's fantastic. I'm not a big fan of the tabs though. And I'm also not a big fan of the repeater creating its own fields. Anyway, that's just my kind of initial view. I'm pretty sure after working with it, get used to it. The tabs aren't going away, they're here to stay. So best to learn how to work with them and make the most of it. Anyway, thanks for watching.